Hey, and welcome to today's jazz guitar lesson all about drop 2 and drop 3 chords. So what I want to show you today is how you can take a drop 2 chord and turn it into a drop 3 chord. And this is really useful because it means it's easier to relate different chord shapes to one another rather than thinking of like all the different chord shapes you could know for a particular chord. It helps you see how things are related to one another. Now, first off, questions you might have: what is drop 2? What is drop 3? A drop 2 chord is where you have the notes of a chord on 4 consecutive strings like this. Like this D minor 7 here. And like this G7 here. And this C major 7 here. So on 4 consecutive strings. Now what I essentially played there was a 2-5-1 in C, in drop 2 voicing. So that D minor 7 is going the root, the 5th, the flat 7, the minor 3rd on the top. And this G7 is also going root, 5th, there we got the 7, there we got the 3. And the C major 7, root, 5th, 7, 3. So they're following that same pattern. Now to turn it into drop 3, all we do, we're going to take the 5th of each chord, which in this D minor 7 is on the D string here, this A, this note here, and we're going to put it an octave higher. We're going to put it on the top of the chord. So we're going to go from this D, A, C, F to putting the A at the very top of the chord, turning it into a drop 3. Now we have D, C, F, A. Now you might think, well, we're playing the same notes, what's the difference? I suppose it's what notes stand out more. This one's got the 3rd on the top. So if you're trying to play a chord melody, D minor 7's the chord, you need the 3rd on the top. This is going to be useful, and it's, you know, the 3rd stands out in that chord. Whereas in the drop 3, it's got the 5th on the top. So if you had the melody you're trying to harmonise as a 5th on the top, an A, this shape's going to be more useful. But I think it's better to see these two as being related to one another, and like the drop 3 or the drop 2 being a modification of the other, rather than thinking, oh, that you can do a D minor 7 there, you can do one there. It's trying to see that, okay, to get from drop 2 to drop 3, we just put that note an octave higher. And it just gives us a D minor 7 with a slightly different feel. Obviously the gap on the drop 3 is quite interesting. So like I said earlier, drop 2 chord is on 4 consecutive strings, like this D minor 7's on A, D, G, B, whereas the drop 3, we have a bass note, then we have nothing on the D string, and then we have the 3 notes. So you get that slightly different tonality by this is all closer on the drop 2. There's a bit more of a spread between the harmony on this drop 3. Now we could do this for the other chords in that 2-5-1. Remember I played this 2-5-1 in drop 2, I went. If I want to make all of that drop 3, I'm going to do the same thing I did to that D minor 7. So we're going to have, then take the drop 2 G7, put the note on the A string an octave higher, and then we have, and then we're going to take C major 7 and take the 5th, put it an octave higher. We'd have, so we've turned D minor 7 from this, drop 2, put the A an octave higher, the 5th, G7 in drop 2, put the 5th an octave higher, D, and C major 7, put the G, the 5th an octave higher. It's quite a good way to practice this, going from drop 2. That change there, but what you've got there is 2 different comping options for a 2-5-1. The drop 2's maybe a bit more mellow because you don't have that high E string on there, which is obviously the brightest string on the guitar, and the drop 2 brings out, say, the 3rd on the top of each chord, an F on the D minor, a B on the G, and then an E on the C major 7, whereas the drop 3, the 5th is on the top of the chord. So these are important things to know, especially if you want to get into harmonising melodies, to learn where different things are. Also, notice how this all relates back to maybe guitar playing you've done pre-playing jazz. Does the drop 2 and drop 3 not just show you, it's basically hidden within this bar chord of a D minor 7, right? The same with the G7 and the C major 7. It's just when we're playing jazz, those big shapes, and they're not often used because there's a lot of repetition in notes. Instead of having 1, 3, 5, 7, when you're playing 6 strings or 5 strings, you got a 4-note chord, so you got to double something. So there's a lot of unnecessary duplication, and for a more mellow sound, we often go with less is more when it comes to guitar chords for playing jazz harmony. Anyway, I thought I'd share this with you just because I think it's really important to think about how we organise and locate chords on the guitar. And maybe we don't need a big chord dictionary with 1,000 jazz chords, and we can, from one shape, think of, like, say, that D-7 broadening out from there. Anyway, let me know if you've got any questions or any comments. I've previously made videos on drop 2 chords and drop 3 chords, so I'll put those on the screen for you now. Check that description for a link to the tab and the chord shapes from today if you need that. There's also a link to my Patreon where we look at a jazz standard each month. Thanks for tuning in. Jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday. Until next time, take care.